Hello, people. This is Lee Cole 3, and today I'm with someone that's going to give me a hand with something. And it's going to be on Phil Leonetti, an interesting character, turned into a big rat, and he was a bad man. And I want to introduce James Proctor. James, introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's James Proctor, and I work with Lee on the wrestling channel, and so we have a good story here about Phil Leonetti, and so just wanted to be part of this.
Now, when we get talking about the Philadelphia mob, we're talking about a lot of treachery and disloyalty, aren't we?
We are.
Okay, and this channel today we're basically going to talk about Leonetti. So I'm going to give you the brief rundown on the Philadelphia mob, and then we're going to get into Leonetti. But so let's start. Okay, so this whole thing happened at the time. The boss of the family was It was Bruno, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. He was there for 20 years, and for 20 years it was a very peaceful reign. And
then all of a sudden, Bruno got hit. Explain what happened there.
Yeah. So people were not happy with the money that was coming in. There was a lot of taxes and money that Bruno was looking for from his capos and soldiers. They felt that they weren't making any money and that Bruno was greedy. So Negro ended up taking him out.
Before the Capa Negro. So we got Bruno. He gets hit.
Yep.
And another thing he was doing, he had this thing where he did not want no drugs being dealt, but yet he was getting a lot of taxes off of drugs himself, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. The Greek mafia was working in drugs in Philadelphia, and they had to pay taxes to the Philly mob to be able to do their drug dealing.
Okay, and then so at that point, explain to me who Antonio Capernegro was.
Yeah, so he was the consigliere for the Philly crime family. He worked for Angelo Bruno, and he ended up taking him out without he didn't have any authorization from the commission on that. So it was an unsanctioned hit.
And so he didn't have a sanction. He got called in basically.
Yeah.
Capernegro, because he had no sanction, and they killed him at the meeting.
Yep.
And that was it. I mean, then they moved on. So after they killed him at the meeting, who took over?
Yeah, so Philip Testa took over, and then had a short reign himself.
Well, Philip Testa was a chicken man, and the chicken man, his son was Salvi Testa, and we're going to get into that. So we're talking the chicken man takes over, right? And so what happens? Explain the Testa, how long his little reign lasted and what happened.
Yeah, he was in there for just less than a year. And so Testa happened, this was in 1981. So in 1980s when Bruno got killed, and then a year later in March of 81, Testa came back to his home in South Philly, and there was a bomb waiting for him.
And they said that parts of his body flew up the street.
Yeah.
And at that time, Nikki Scarfo, he was banished to Atlantic City. And once this came down, who took over the family at that point? Once they took him out.
Yeah. So Peter Casella was the underboss. He had ordered the hit, and then he had a capo, Frank Narducci, that actually carried it out. And so after that, they were called to, along with Scarfo, to answer to the commission.
And Scarfo came in. They let him come back from Atlantic City, and he gave it. What was Scarfo's position when he came back in?
Yeah, he was the consigliere at the time.
And so didn't they shelve him? Now, who did they shelve where everything started moving toward Scarfo? So Scarfo started moving up the ladder. He's there. What happens?
Yeah. So when that happened, Casella actually got shelved to Florida, or he just, basically told to go to Florida, and Narducci was killed.
And who killed Narducci? Salvatore Testa got revenge for his father, pretty much, didn't he?
Yes, exactly.
And so now you have, what happens at this point? Who takes over the family totally? It's Scarfo, and who is with?
Yes, right. So Scarfo took over as the boss, and then his friend Chucky Merlino was made the underboss, and then Frank Monte, who was a carryover, or really, I guess what you'd say is someone that was close to Testa. He was the consigliere.
And where did Leonetti come in on this? Like, how does he? Now, Leonetti is what to Scarfo? Scarfo's his uncle, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Leonetti is his nephew, and so he's been involved with Nicky actually from a young age. So even that is kind of funny. There was a story not funny, but more sad, and when Leonetti was 10 years old, he was with Nicky, and Nicky said, "Hey, I've got a dead body in the trunk." And it was true.
And he was sitting in the car with his uncle.
Yeah.
And how close was Leonetti to Nicky Scarfo?
Yeah, he looked at Scarfo as a father figure, because Leonetti, real father, left. He wasn't involved at all in his life, and so it was just Leonetti's mom was a single mom, and so Nicky Scarfo became very involved in the upbringing of Phil from at least the age of 10, moving to adult. And
then you had Leonetti. There was a little jealousy. He claimed he was close to Testa, but Salvatore Testa became close to Nicky Scarfo. In the beginning, Scarfo trusted him. And what position was Salvatore Testa at that point?
Yeah, he was. Testa was a capo, and part of the problem is that Testa was popular with people, and Nicky just felt that Salvatore was a threat.
Now, is there anybody who claims that Leonetti was in Scarfo's ear to take him out?
Yeah, I mean, that was a lot of it. And so Leonetti had jealousy towards the relationship of Salvatore.
And Leonetti was come out and eventually say that people would say, well, Scarfo at that time was considered nutty. He was doing a lot of things that was very questionable. Yeah. And people would say, why didn't Testa, along with Leonetti, take out Scarfo?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. But at the time, Leonetti felt that he was better off with his uncle.
Okay. And so, okay, let's get up here. So we got revenge going on here. Okay, we showed Frank Narducci. He was hit in the beginning. And dead bodies started coming up in the streets. And then you had Rocco Marinucci right here, right?
Yep.
And he was also killed by Salvatore Testa. So Sally Testa was a cold-blooded killer.
Yeah, he was.
Okay, and he's knocking people off left and right. And people, I'm not leaving those graphic pictures up, because YouTube doesn't want them up for more than a second or two. So that's why I put them up and take them down. Some people ask me that. Okay, so here you go. Testa's killing people. Then Testa doesn't realize that Scarfo does not trust him.
Right.
And what happens?
Yeah. So basically, he got killed. He was shot to death on the side of a road.
Do they know who did it, or did he?
Well, they know it was part of the family or someone close to Scarfo, but not sure if they have not ever determined who that was.
Okay, and here's the picture. And here's the picture of Salvatore Testa on the side of the road. I mean, and the sad part is when you look at these pictures here. I mean, Testa was very close with Nikki Scarfo until he started becoming paranoid. But what happened at that point? Once Scarfo killed him, what happened to Scarfo's reputation once he killed someone so loyal to him?
Well, now that's where the problem was, that none of his capos trusted him. They felt that if Salvador could be killed, that they could also. So no one trusted him.
And Sally Testa, once he was killed, it's their attitude is, well, this guy was the closest guy to Scarfo, and Scarfo took him out.
Yeah, I mean they were really close, and then he takes him out. So that tells you about his loyalty, lack of loyalty is why.
And this is where Leonetti starts getting a higher position, right?
Yeah, Leonetti actually moved up to be the underboss.
Okay, and explain.
In '86.
Okay, so explain what happened from that point on, right before Leonetti was arrested. How did that whole thing go down, starting with Scarfo?
Yeah, so so as you know, in the '80s, there were two Philly wars, and then Scarfo finally secured his position as boss, and then he promoted Leonetti as his underboss. But the feds were very concerned, obviously, because of all the murders, all the dead people on the street. There are at least 15 soldiers that were killed during these wars.
And so what happened? Scarfo was arrested along with Leonetti? How did that go down?
Yeah, so they were both arrested. They were charged with racketeering. There was also charges of things like loan sharking. They were skimming off the casinos in Atlantic City, and so they got found guilty. It was 55 years for Scarfo and 45 years for Leonetti.
And what made this unusual is Leonetti got sentenced first before he became a rat.
Yeah, exactly. That's unlike the situation with Sammy Gravano, where it happened before.
Okay, and so what happened when he decided to be? So he decides to become a rat. What happens at that point?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is that they said you only have to serve 5 years in prison, and he admitted to taking part in 10 murders, pulling the trigger twice.
And one of those murders, and we'll discuss what happened after with this. Yeah. One of these murders was Vincent Falcone, which they said that he was responsible for killing him. Is that correct?
Yeah, and actually that was when Leonetti made his bones. So that
with Falcone, okay. And we'll talk about what happens with the Falcone thing down the line, but that's pretty incredible too. So everybody's getting busted at this time. Sammy Gravano takes the stand on the Gambino family. Mm-hmm. But didn't they have Leonetti in the background waiting?
Yeah, so that was part of it, and part of it too was that they had told Sammy that we were able to cut a deal for Leonetti, only served 5 years, and that was part of the motivation to get for Sammy to accept turning to be a government witness.
So here you got two guys that were very high up in their families.
Yeah, both underbosses.
Both underbosses, and they both were involved. Altogether, 30 murders between the two of them. Mm-hmm. And they basically both went to prison for 5 years.
Yeah.
And Sammy admitted to killing one person. Leonetti actually killed more people than Sammy Gravano, right?
Yep, by pulling the trigger, yep.
By pulling the trigger. Sammy was involved with more murders, but Leonetti was. And so Leonetti gets 5 years. What happens when Leonetti comes out of prison after 5 years?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, he goes into the witness protection program. They gave him a new identity. The other thing is really bizarre to me, but it shows how bad this program is with rats. They allowed him to take $1 million worth of cash from that he had illegally gained, and he's able to take that with him as part of starting over.
And Leonetti during the 1980s, he was basically a multimillionaire when he went into the program. He was he was involved with racketeering.
Yeah. Loan sharks.
Yeah.
Similar in the casinos. Yeah, that's what I'd compare him to, because in that time, and so in 1976 is when gambling became legalized in New Jersey. New Jersey was in a bad situation financially, and so they weren't tax revenues. So they said, yeah, we'll build casinos. And so that worked really well for Scarfo at the time, and of course Leonetti. And so they were able to get in and make money by skimming off casinos. They had their own construction company. So it was very similar to what Sammy Gravano was doing in New York with Gambinos and all of his rackets.
And you know, when you hear about the Philly family, it was a very violent family, and it wasn't a small family. I mean, this is the family right here when Scarfo was in charge. They had plenty of soldiers. They had leaders, and they were
spread out everywhere too. That's what's crazy about Philly, is that they had capos in Delaware. They had, of course, in Atlantic City, Camden, Elizabethtown. They also even had a crew up in north end of Boston for a little bit of time.
As a matter of fact, Bobby Luisi talks about eventually going down to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
You know, and they did have their hands everywhere. But, you know, it's like there was nobody. A matter of fact, someone that understands the Philly family really well explained one thing to me. That when Joey Merlino took over, he was threatened. And he told the family from New York, if you come down here and start a war, a lot of you guys are going to go back in body bags. So they weren't afraid to stand up to New York, were they?
No, I mean, they were very violent, and they did things differently, because in New York, they wanted to keep more of a lower profile. But what you'll notice about, especially with Nicky Scarfo, is that he purposely allowed bodies to be found out in the street. And he would, and he would send messages. You would have one guy that had taken from the family. So what did they do when they killed him? They stuffed $300 in his rectum, as just showing that you don't steal from the family. So, I mean, this guy didn't pull punches, and they killed a judge as well. I mean, they didn't have the same rules that New York had.
Matter of fact, Nicky Scarfo he was involved in a murder when he was a young guy. And, here he is right here, and he's sitting there. The cop has a smile behind his face. They got the cuffs out in front, and all three of these guys are under arrest, and they don't exactly look it.
No, that was a longshoreman.
That murder?
Yeah. So this was a union guy, a longshoreman, and only got 6 months. So don't know how you can do that without having some sort of insight into the police. That was a Philadelphia, or that was police in Pennsylvania.
And they looked kind of comfortable standing there at the desk. It's like they knew something was up. But
sure.
The most amazing thing is that he only got a short amount of time where they knew he murdered the guy. There was no doubt he murdered the guy.
Yeah, exactly. And then the whole thing later with the nail bombs, that's something only the Sicilians would normally do. You didn't have that supposed to happen with the mafia.
Every time Scarfo
talking about Testa's death,
right?
And how
every time Scarfo sent a message, like you said, it was violent. He didn't chop the bodies up and make them disappear. No, like they did in New York. I mean, they would never find a body again.
Well, you could just slide him and he would have you killed. If he thought you disrespected him, there'd be no talking. There wouldn't be a sit down. He'd have you killed.
And so here's Leonetti. Leonetti's his underboss, and they both get busted together. And he decides that he's not going to do the 45 years. He's going to flip, and he flipped on Scarfo, and he put him away for. He put Scarfo away for a long time, didn't he? I mean,
Yeah, 55 years, and then there were 45 other people through the years that he testified against.
they even had him on almost. He could have testified against John Gotti, but Gravano didn't.
The Chin as well.
And he also is the one that made people in New York understand that the Chin was faking his illness.
Right.
They didn't realize that Chin was in charge of that family until Leonetti started talking about it.
Yeah, they always had a front boss. The Genoveses would have a front boss, and then the real boss was behind the scenes.
So Leonetti, he has a lot of power. He comes out, and what kind of witness is he considered when he's on the stand?
Well, I mean, he was an incredible witness for the government because he was used for several years, and 45 guys got put away, and he kept on being put in. He kept on testifying in different government trials. You compare that to someone, like John A. Light, one trial, and they said he was the worst witness ever.
Yeah, even putting John A. Light in the same sentence as Leonetti is like questionable, right?
I mean, A. Light's not a made man or any of that.
Yeah, he was considered a horrible witness, where Leonetti was like Gravano. They were considered great witnesses.
Yeah, Gravano again. Yep, a great witness.
And then Leonetti was different. When he came out, he started doing interviews with fake hairdos and stuff, right? And then
he looked like Billy Batch from Goodfellas.
Yeah, he did. There was one of them out there where he really looked. It did not. He looked kind of totally silly. But then he wrote this book, which makes him look like the guy. It's called Mafia Prince. And this guy is calling himself a Mafia Prince. I think that would actually go to someone probably like Joey Testa. But Joey Testa got killed. Notice the book puts him with Scarfo behind him. Yeah. I mean, that gives you an idea. And just so you know, people, Scott Bernstein was involved in this book, and Scott Bernstein's been on my show a couple times. But this book was a big hit. It was so Leonetti is up in his 70s now, right? Yeah. Okay. And he hasn't really gotten involved like the other rats in YouTube, has he?
Yeah, he hasn't. I know he did a little bit, some interviews after he wrote the book in 2012. I know that he's been on the Vlad TV, I believe, and so he's done a few things, but he's not really out there like Sammy Gravano or any of these other guys.
But to give you an idea of the balls this man has, he murdered Vincent Falcone. And who did he marry?
They married the former girlfriend of Vincent Falcone.
So he married the girlfriend of Vincent Falcone, the man he killed.
Yep, he was killed just because he supposedly was disrespectful to Nikki Scarfo. So he made his bones with Vincent Falcone and then was boning his girlfriend.
Amazing. Well, that gives you an idea. When we talk about, where would you put Leonetti when we talk about rats, these guys that come forward, where would you put Leonetti in that order of rats? I mean, is he up there with everybody, all the big guys that knew a lot about the mafia?
Yeah, he really knew a lot, and he knew a lot with different families as well. So the Philly family was really close with the Gambinos and also the Genoveses. And so he had a lot of damaging testimony, and the government found that he was very credible. And for him to be, so he was an underboss from 86 to 88 when he got arrested. So about 2 years, but had been around Nicky Scarfo all of his life. So, I mean, definitely, I would say he's a rat up there with Sammy Gravano. But the difference is, the good thing, at least if you could say a good thing, he's not on YouTube. He's not out there saying, why he did it.
And one of the things when you think about him, like Sammy came out, had all his money, basically got arrested for the drugs and went back into prison.
Yep.
And when he came out, he had no money.
Right.
But Leonetti came out. How much money did they say that he had waiting for him when he came out of prison?
Yeah, it was $1 million at least. I've heard reports 3 million as well, but at least $1 million.
So
in cash.
So he sat down with the feds and made a damn good deal.
Yeah, definitely.
He's a young guy at the time. He's not like these other guys. He's a young man.
He's young. Yeah, exactly.
And so he can make a deal with the feds. They let him keep his money. He does 5 years standing on his hands.
Right.
It's nothing.
Right.
And then he gets out, and he even gets to marry the woman waiting for him of the guy that he whacked.
Right.
Which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, it definitely is.
And I find this a fascinating stories because people think, okay, you got 5 families in New York, the violence and everything, but this family in Philadelphia that was, just a couple hundred miles down the highway was a damn violent family. And they were right there. They were almost like the 6th family.
Yeah, they had over 60 made men. So you had 60 soldiers and probably about 200 associates. And plus, like I said, there's 5 or 6 different territories they had outside of Philly. So, I mean, they were definitely, I'd equate them similarly to the New Jersey family.
And John Gotti was close to Nikki Scarfo, right?
Right. And even when you look at Sammy the Bull, he was the messenger between the families. So he was really close to Nicky Scarfo. In fact, if you listen to some of the podcasts that Sammy does, he talks about talking with Nicky Scarfo, and Nicky Scarfo basically warning him about Gotti, talking behind his back.
And Scarfo had the same problem as John Gotti had, because John Gotti Jr. pretty much had eyes on him afterwards. But so did Nikki Scarfo Jr., who is, I believe, in prison right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's just
right. And what the difference is, I would say, at least so he's in prison now. And in fact, what's interesting is that Leonetti actually testified for the government, but actually said that Junior was not guilty of the crimes he is being accused of the murder he's being accused of. Now I'm talking about Nicky Scarfo Jr.
Did that help him? Did that help Scarfo Jr.?
Yeah, it helped him. I mean, he didn't get death penalty or life in prison, but
I haven't really done much research on Nicky Scarfo Jr., but I do know that some taxes and stuff. But he wound up getting a boatload of time, like his father. And from what his father went to Marion, and he broke there. And John Gotti did not break there, but he broke. He signed papers to get the hell out of there.
Most definitely.
Yeah, he just pretty much went nuts in there.
And I think that, definitely. I think the difference too is that I never saw John Gotti as this paranoid man like Nicky Scarfo. Nicky Scarfo was totally.
Nicky Scarfo sitting in the cell with his voices.
Yeah, exactly.
And where John Gotti was one voice, him. And that would probably be the difference between the two of them. And if you want to compare gangsters, we got to say Scarfo did his time. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
But he couldn't handle his time with his voices, could he?
No. No. Yeah. Well, his son will get out, they said, in 2037. So,
wow.
Yeah. He's in Fairfield Township. Right.
So his son's going to be an old man by the time he gets out, too.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Yeah, he got out for a little bit and then went right back into prison. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's when John Jr., what he's done to not go back to prison. And then you get these other guys that come out and they get right back into the life of crime.
Yeah, exactly. Just don't understand it.
And when
That might be
Leonetti,
all he knows, you know.
and when Leonetti was on the stand and all that, this was a huge thing in Philadelphia, wasn't it? It was all over the newspaper.
Oh yeah, I mean, you look at the newspapers and you got the 3-inch headlines on this stuff. I mean, it's just a big deal there.
Like it's you got this like witness recounts his lethal history. I mean, but they had front pages, back pages, and you know
Yeah.
we could talk about there's so many segments of the Philly mob. You know, Joey Merlino you can get into, but
Yeah,
you know that's not our area.
right.
Someone like say Jeff Canarsie, very
Mhm.
familiar with that stuff, would put it out and probably could talk about it without even having to research.
Right.
Whereas I found doing this, James, and you probably find it too, that once you go through this family and you see all the deceit, all the betrayal,
Mhm.
I mean, it was quite a bit in this family, wasn't there?
Oh, yeah, it's just, I mean, and that's something that we see over and over again especially in the 80s and 90s and even now. So there's not much loyalty.
Yeah, and it's like the wars were going on up in New York and stuff, but a lot of those bodies were disappearing, and these guys didn't care. They just tossed them right out the car, put them in the, you know, just to send a message. It's a fascinating story. And Leonetti spent 5 years. He pretty much spent 5 years in his prison for the life he lived.
Yeah.
Murder, robbery, everything you could think of. Leonetti did it. 5 years. You know, that tells you a lot about him, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. And so, but you know, when you look at it, he put a lot of people away. So, you know, he's a rat, and
he's a horrible rat because he does a book. He doesn't understand. You know, there's a lot of guys out there that are like him. The only difference is he has tons of money. He doesn't need to come on YouTube.
No,
you know, he's just a guy like that probably took his money and made it into more money.
Oh yeah,
because he was definitely an intelligent man.
Yeah, he was. I can give you that.
But it's kind of he was running around the background, kept whispering in the crazy man's ear to kill people.
Yeah,
you know, and he listened to him. And you know, this guy sat in the car as a 10-year-old boy with his uncle, and then testified on his uncle, like it was nothing.
Right.
You know, so there was no loyalty there. The loyalty was to him, to Leonetti. He was loyal to himself. He killed the man, took the man's girlfriend. Sally Testa he was close to, and Sally Testa was killed. And him and Testa probably could have taken that family over together with no problem.
Yeah, exactly. And the end result was the Scarfo pretty much is blackballed from the Philly mob. You know, they didn't help. Once Nicky was put away, that was it. Even his son wasn't in the Philly mob. He got made in the Lucchese family. He was capo in the Lucchese's in New York.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
And so he went down with charges from when all the New York guys started getting busted, I take it.
Right. Yeah. And he had kind of an interesting past himself, Scarfo Jr. So
was he like his father, a little bit crazy, or was he a little?
Yeah. There was a big. Yeah, I don't have all the details. There was a murder that he was investigating where it was like on a Halloween night or something. So I'm not sure all the details, but you know, they tried to kill him and he tried to kill someone else. But you know, we have to do something on Scarfo Jr. one day.
You know, yeah, it's, you know, and that's the thing about the mob genre. You know, we also have the wrestling show. People, if you sub here, please go sub to my wrestling show. The wrestling show is called Wrestling with the Devil. It's growing real fast. And we're going to be doing some lives there. We're going to do a live here most likely Thursday. I enjoyed you doing this with me, James.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. Thank you.
And maybe we could do some more work together.
Sure.
But I appreciate everything. And people, please like this. Please sub to the channel if you haven't. We're going to have at least 2-3 of these coming out a week. We're going to try to stay a little drama-free and put up good stuff. But thank you, James. And
thank you.
People, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this.